She stood on the hill overlooking Ponyville, looking at nothing at all, none of it. Neither mansion nor cottage stood out to her. One thing that only drew her eyes, the long gray building at the northeast edge of town. She stood hating the wings and the legs that would not move, and hating the deeper dread buried within that kept them frozen. She knew that she needed to go. She needed to be with them. Still, she couldn't force herself to move, not even as the sun began crumbling in the horizon, doubtfully tracking the path that she had set for follow hours without her help. The silence was broken by the beat of soft, enormous wings. Twilight turned hurriedly and smoothing the emotion that she had been wearing openly behind a practiced, stoic expression. But she froze in shock as she recognized the last pony that she had expected to see. Celestia? The former princess of the sun folded her wings, stepped forward across the grass, and nodded her head in a solemn greeting. I thought you might be here, Celestia said, nuzzling Twilight's cheek briefly as she came alongside her. Twilight blinked in confusion, hoping it would hit her tears, but as she worked to blink them away as well. You fought, but why? And why are you here? Celestia looked. Twilight was surprised to see, somehow smaller than she remembered, almost impossibly so, hardly different from a normal Pegasus or unicorn. It took her a moment to realize that it was only the result of her own skewered perspective. She had been accustomed for decades seeing Celestia clad all in gold, and to looking up to her now from far below. It felt strange, almost uncanny, to see her so truly eye to eye. It had been so long since they last met? Spike wrote to me, Celestia said. I asked him to many years ago, whenever he thought this time had come. She looked down over Ponyville, and somehow Twilight could tell her gaze had settled in exactly the same place as she herself had been starting only moments ago. The struggle is over, isn't it? Now they're only waiting. Twilight felt the clench of panic in her heart as the words spoken, so gently, too gently to hold such impossible weight. It was suddenly hard to breathe again. She turned away, but somehow she could still feel Celestia's eyes on her. I know, Twilight. She broke off, unable to continue. In the moment of silence, her former teacher stepped closer, then laid a hoof on her shoulder and a wing over her back. I know. Twilight wanted the feelings to let go. She wanted to lean into Celestia, like she had many years ago, times for so long ago, and she let herself be vulnerable again. Instead, she took a long, slow breath, as though she could force the pain to lie and still claim in the air. This was not the time or place. She had a role to fulfill, and she wanted to project the strength that she knew the others would expect to see her, the strength she wanted to leave for her when she joined them down below. She wanted to have strength, so she was used to seeing the pony beside her now, tenderly looking at her side. You could talk to me, Celestia said, her voice soft, low, and kind. Right now there's just two of us. You could say anything you're hurting to say. I know what it's like to wear the mask for everyone else, but you don't have to wear it for me, Twilight. It was exactly what she had been, desperate for someone. Anyone to tell her for days, weeks. Even so, she still resisted. She almost denied her, but before she could fully rally herself, even before she quite had the idea of what to say, the words escaped the strangled rush. I'm not ready. Then the dam broke. Her chest heaved and convulsed painfully, and her head suddenly forced down by the enormous pressure within. It was tough, something greater, even in the weight of the realm, had settled over her, and nothing she could do was enough to bear it. Restrained sobs choked her and tore at her throat, even she continued to cry and subdue them back into silence. I'm not ready, Celestia. No one ever is, Twilight, Celestia said, though through some gentleness. Twilight was surprised to hear something off of her own voice in Celestia's, quiver and pain. Somehow it gave her back just a little bit of calm, so she could desperately wanted. But I am supposed to be, she said, hating how young she sounded to herself. She clenched her teeth in a sudden scowl, trying to force unsteadiness and rippling back pain down where it had come from to the bottle up the good and tight. I should be. I've known this day was coming. I've always known the price. I've had time to prepare, is what I'm trying to say. In spite of her efforts, her voice shook. It was all she could do to crush the rolling tide of her enormous emotions and kept talking. I lived this moment in my mind for 1,000 times, 1,000 times over again. I've seen it happen over and over on nights when the clouds cover the sky. It seems like there's no end to the darkness as always. There is in the heart of it. Was this day. I see them lying here, watching me, and I can't do anything. I've seen it over and over again, and I'm still not ready. I don't. She drove her hoof into the soft earth and felt the cave beneath her, the sods buckling and the tearing beneath her strength. Strength was all she would have. In the moment given was an instant to go back to any moment at all, just to have more time, or not to be here. She wasn't sure which. I don't want to say goodbye. Celestia said nothing, only tightened her would hold her with a wing. Why, Celestia? Why am I still not ready? Because you've asked yourself too much, Celestia answered quietly. That's why I'm here. You've reached another marker in your journey, one you could never have been prepared to face, not even the way you're imagining. I'm not ready to do this, and I don't want to. I can't. Twilight shook her head, her lips pulled apart to bare her teeth into the grimace of pain beyond the shape of words. She pulled herself out from Celestia's wing and strode away, unable to look at her teacher, so strong and quiet there behind her. I don't want to. I can't. She tore a long, grating gasp from the air and held it, aching to release the scream that she refused to give in to. Instead, she let the air out in a ragged breath, and then when she spoke again, her words were barely a whisper. I don't know if I can. Once again, Celestia came alongside and held her within her wing, refusing to let Twilight distance herself. I know, Twilight. No, you don't understand. Twilight felt her body tremble, as though every muscle were trying to hold back in what her mind and her heart, and the pressure was simply too great. I don't want to. Part of me just desperately wants to go away somewhere and wait until someone tells me that it's over, and I won't have to do anything. She released the words before she could stop herself, and she stood in shock, almost unable to believe what she had just said, and she had allowed herself to say it. I don't know if I can do it. You can choose that, Celestia said quietly. I mean that without qualification, without judgment. No, Twilight said, almost a snarl. She looked at her old teacher aghast. How could you even suggest that? Why not? Somehow Celestia managed to ask without any intonation. Her voice was perfectly openly neutral. Let me explain as best I can. I do believe you are strong enough to face this together with her, and I believe with everything boiled down to the most essential elements, that you would want it anyways as well. But I am not here to help you make one choice or another, to tell you something that is right or wrong. I only want to help you through whatever choice you make, and what may be is the right thing for you today is not to face this directly. It may sadden her, but there is a cold truth at the heart of this. You will be the one to carry forward the pain of to this day, and not her. You can choose indeed. You have the right to choose what that pain will be, or try to, but she soon will be free of her pain. I can't accept that, Twilight said through her gritted teeth. I can't. After all we've been through. Yes, I know what you're saying. Maybe if things were different between us, between any of us, maybe I could accept letting the thing pass me like that. But I can't let her face alone with this to make it easier on myself. That's not right choice for me. I don't think I could live with myself. Then I suspect that you will do the impossible, as you have many times before now. Celestia turned her eyes from Twilight, straightening up and looking down over her as she spoke. You will go to her, and you will walk her in her final steps, until she must continue on where you no longer can. Without turning her head, Celestia glanced back to Twilight and gave her a small, encouraging smile. That is who you are, Twilight. You are someone who's always been there to help the ones who needed you, to help see their journey through, even if it costs you so much. But how can I, Celestia? How can I go down and stand there and just watch while I won't? I'll never... She shook her head again, clutching her teeth fiercely. I've always wondered, and hated myself every time I've wondered, who will be first, whatever it might make a difference, whatever it might somehow be a little easier to say goodbye to one another, as if it would be possible, and it's not right. It's just not right to think of it that. Still I waited and wondered, but it was never her. In all the times I wondered, it was never her. Even when the medicine stopped, Twilight fell silent, unable to speak another word. The anguish had boiled its way back up to her throat, and had cut off her voice completely. She took a moment and few unsteady breaths to regain her composure. She was still full of life. She finally said, quiet and steady to avoid bringing the pain too close. She spent the entire day in the festival with all of us last week. You could barely just tell. Why, Celestia? Why does it have to be her? She shut her eyes, hot tears finally breaking free, and her shoulders heaved as her breath shook uncontrollably. Once again she asked, why does it have to be her? Celestia didn't answer, and Twilight then realized that she didn't want her to answer. She didn't want any vague comforts or tired, meaningless words. In some exhaustion, being part of her mind, she managed to rationalize that Celestia probably knew she didn't want that. Instead, Celestia only held her and let her lean into her when it had felt like her legs were going to give out. How is it? Twilight asked, when she'd gotten out of her breath under control for another moment. That after everything I've learned, all the things I've seen, how can it be in the end? That just really want everything to stay the same? Because we're not exactly that different, Twilight, Celestia said, from all the ponies around us. Despite the obvious things that everyone fixates on our labels, our bodies are connections to the elemental powers. Our fixed place is in the maelstrom of time, and yet all the ways that matter, we are not that different at all. Like them, we meet others and experience things, find moments of joy, form bonds. We fall in love, and then when time moves forward and bonds weaken and break, we grieve at their passing. This is the moment that would have come to you no matter what courses of your life might have taken. Whatever you become like Cadence and Luna and me, or whatever your journey leads you somewhere. Celestia let a deep sigh and pulled Twilight a little closer to her. Like everyone else, we fear the unknown that lies ahead. We fear that kind of world that could exist without was becoming familiar. We fear we won't want that world, that nothing will be there that filled the emptiness of what's left was, what will never be again. And just like them, we are powerless to stop it. Not even we who eternal can spend eternity in the precious and ephemeral moment. Celestia raised her head and gazed out on the horizon, directly at the thin flaming thread of sunlight that remained at the world's edge. I have watched so many fade away, my most dear friend, over centuries since I've made that choice to remain and wait instead of accepting for the most terrible farewell. I instead said goodbye to many of her friends and loves and wonderful cherished ponies, and not just those good goodbyes were for death. It was a strange lesson, that growing parts losing touch, the ponies I failed along the way, and those goodbyes could be somehow even more painful. But before any of that, there was a hill for me too, a hill just like this one, long, long ago, from which I could see the cottage where my first true friend was breathing her last. Twilight couldn't help but snap the attention just a little. She had never heard Celestia spoke of her first friend. Who? Her name was Dolores. When I met her, she attended the gardens all around the mountain village that would one day grow to become Canterlot. You've read most villages in Equestria were rather bleak places to our days, door necessity and ponies, worn to the bone by the bitter labor. But her home and everything surrounding it bloomed to gardens and would have been the envy of the empires. In time, she built the first public botanical gardens in Equestria, and she designed and tended the palace grounds when they were built. And she was whippish, I suppose you could say, Celestia added with a laugh. I'm not sure she knew how to communicate with ponies in a way that wasn't barely acerbic, but she cared deeply, and somehow that always showed through. Maybe it was that smile of hers. Maybe it was the way she always seemed to be completely sure everyone was better than themselves thought they were. I'm not certain even now, and I almost didn't go down to her at the end, so I had a feeling to this day would come for you, and I couldn't prepare you, but I could make sure you didn't face it alone. And how did you do it? Twilight asked. How did you keep going to them over and over, just to watch as they left forever? Celestia smiled, the saddest smile Twilight has ever seen her give. Dear Twilight, you will ever be the seeker of solutions, but I'm afraid there are no words of wisdom. There is no secret knowledge or mental trick or bargain beyond this veil. There is what you can only have is always done. In many challenges you have faced, be there and endure. It is easy and that hard. One of the hardest things perhaps you will ever do. Twilight stared down at the long gray building. Her eyes finally seemed to have gone dry, although they had stunned in the crisp evening air. She didn't feel better as such as spent. It never felt real. Back when everyone had gone home, and I was trying to figure out how to sleep with these stupid things crowding my bed. She surprised herself by giving a snort, dry laugh, and shuffled her wings onto her back. Even on the first night I realized that if I had really become like you, I might outlive them. But it seems so far away. It's something that would happen to some pony else. We had also so many years ahead of us, so many chances, so much time spent together. Her face fell and she blinked, as if though it just only occurred when she added, there was certainly no time at all. Which is another thing we have in common in our life. I've been told so many times over the past years that they expect we have some special, altered sense of time's passing. And who am I to say? Maybe it's you who will be different. But for me it all goes quickly. I find over and over I get settled into a routine and just live out the days, like everyone else. It's such effort to look over far in the horizon. Yet even so, I still believed in the value of looking in the distance is limited. Life is happening now, all around us. We miss so much of it. It seems a shame to miss even more looking down over it, all over from the mountaintop. Are you really the one going to talk about the mountaintops? Twilight asked, jerking her head towards Canterlot with a shaky, weary grin. I was speaking metaphorically, Celestia said, affecting the air of the indigenous premise. Twilight felt so glad that she could feel a response in her laugh, a real, honest laugh, however soft. For a few moments they simply sat together, and Twilight felt her breathing grow steadily as the pain receded to a small whisper. Not gone nor even lessened, merely settled into the space. Celestia had helped her make for it. Then Twilight bit her lip, as a thought occurred to her. Celestia, ask your questions, my friend. I am here tonight for you. Even so, Twilight hesitated, unsure of how to put the feeling into words. Part of her wondered if she wanted to hear the answer on this of all days. She shook her head. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be talking about this. About me right now. This isn't about me. It's about her and them. Twilight, there is not a wrong way to experience grief, or that treats the wounds as it conflicts, and you cannot care for your friend if you do not care for yourself. Twilight blinked and gave Celestia a quick mock glare. Isn't that a little cruel, Celestia? Quoting my own letters back at me? I have found it effectively strategy in the past. Twilight laughed again, but it turned dry and brittle, crumbling into nothing. when she returned the question that had stalked her. Have you ever felt that you couldn't do it anymore? After so many deaths, hasn't it ever been so much for you that you didn't want to meet anyone else? So you don't have to keep losing them over and over again? You really have heard some stories over the years, Celestia said, not unkindly. And I can certainly understand how it might seem that way, especially right now. From now where you stand, it looks like a bleak of future, full of so many partings that you wonder how I carry them all. Perhaps you wonder if I lost count. Twilight waited, not wanting to ask, but knowing that indeed that tactless question was exactly what began to wonder in her recent weeks. At times like this, yes, I do feel like I can't do it anymore, Celestia said. I have learned to recognize the days when such moods will come upon me, when the sun is setting on the things I have grown to cherish, and I wonder if I'll allow myself or force myself to go through it again. Perhaps if the last sunset is the final time. But you don't keep feeling that way. No. So then, she swallowed, feeling her own sorrow begin to creep up on her. Everyone you've met going away, is that really something you can get used to? Does it just get any easier? For several seconds, Celestia mused over her answer, chewing just barely at the edge of her lip. No, she finally said, almost a whisper. And I thought it would, or maybe I hope it would. When the second century began rolling into the third, I really did. But when the generation after generation passed, all those friendships became special in their own ways. No, it does not ever get any easier. Then why? Twilight looked down at the grass, almost moist black soil that she could see lying beneath it. Near her left hoof, a minuscule ladybug was trundling mindlessly along, like a live coal in the depths of dead furnace. Why do you keep circling the cycle over? Well, let me instead ask you a different question. If you had the chance, would you trade away any of the moments you had in the past to erase this present sorrow? If it was possible, would you undo the meeting of your friends, write a different life for you absent them, or in order to avoid this cost? Well, as princess, I couldn't possibly, Twilight said, flashing Celestia a shaky smile. We've established several times over in the intention of our friendship group that was not only beneficial to us, but crucial for the survival of the entire nation. With almost ludicrous sympathy, so at the very least, as your successor, I couldn't do any good coincidence, put every pony at risk for my own sake like that. Celestia rolled her eyes in a way that she knew perfectly well while Twilight was not only stalling, but finging it in a deliberately poor manner to stall further. We are not speaking as princesses, Twilight. We are speaking as friends. But if you're going to insist upon being irrelevant, then simply just imagine that you could set the terms. You could make it so our nation's trials and threats result into roughly in the same flavorable outcomes. Would you do it? You know I wouldn't. Why not? Twilight glanced over at Celestia, surprised to feel a flash of something that almost felt like irritation. Celestia was gazing back at her with a coy expression, how looking perfectly like in the mentor Twilight had grown up with, putting some sly exercise into her student in the classroom. Twilight hardly was in the mood for it. Was this really the moment of philosophy quiz, out of all things? The problem was, this sort of approach would still work on her, and they both knew it, almost by instinct. The analytical part of her mind had already started threading those ideas together to an answer, reaching back through the information it could find, all sorting together before her. A balloon, dissembled amidst a whirlwind of annoyance and fear, but deeper below, uncertainty and vulnerability, the sense of being alone and unsupported in a strange place, the gestures of welcome, the smiles that had slowly broken through the shell that she had built. Share of doubt, joy given, fears conquered, games, celebrations, regrets, shared to the chirping crickets and the crackle of a burning log. The taste of bright, tart ginger in a cold drink, bought and shared within the whim of the scorching heat of a strange city. Quiet nights looking up at the stairs until the air was too cold to bear, sharing the scratchy blanket. And at the fights, yes, even the small fights came to her as something she would trade the moment of grief for within an instant. A small glimmer of amusement. She realized that in the way that she had made the trade, just the other way around. The memories, no. Not even the memories, the accumulation out of all these moments, experiences they not only passed through but created. They had been together second by second until they crystallized, set in time for eternity. They were immovable, unchangeable, irreplaceable. There is even if she could even never thread back to them. The elements and fragments of time have only built together were a part of what they become, a whole of her, the whole of each of them, and even the midst of their grief. To Twilight they were more beautiful than anything. In all their adventures they could have built or changed and wondered at. Yet the still recollections only seemed to dig the blade lodged into her heart a little deeper. "I suppose you want me to say, because it was worth it?" Twilight said. She was still generally torn from whatever she truly felt in the answer, or whenever she merely thought it was the right academically. And in a way, I know it was worth it, if I was given some incredible wish like you describing. No, I wouldn't change it. I would want to do it again if I could, but that's just it. I do want everything that passed over again, not to redo it with other ponies. I'd want to be the younger version of myself, the one who hasn't imaged in this yet. It was worth it, but that doesn't mean it feels like it was worth it right now. It feels as if the pain is all exists, Celestia murmured, and that is all that ever existed, eclipsing and corrupting the light of those times you don't want to trade away. Yes, and I don't know if I could try to do it again, or if I want to. Not like that. So it has been for me, nearly every time I said goodbye, though I would finally utterly break me. I have thought many times that I wouldn't be able to try again, carrying the weight of those who have gone. Then Celestia smiled, an expression seemed to show how much amusement as sort of playful annoyance. And then, as though I haven't learned to expect over and over, there has been a meeting of some pony new, some bright smile new, shining eyes, and the wonder of the beauty of it all, the world, striding through the daylight without knowing what awaits them, looking for the place where they really belong, looking for friendship. That's what ponies misunderstood when they guess how it must be for us. We who stand outside of time, we don't live carrying its infinite magnitude, with all of its loss and grief and perfect clarity, as though it was just happened. As you yourself have already realized, we have lived in the smallness of town, as it fits from one moment to the next. It is perhaps the most important thing we have in common with other ponies, as it just heals them. Time heals as well. Twilight took a deep breath, but felt her head and her shoulders sag. She felt utterly exhausted, and she hadn't even begun. Her friend was still waiting for her. She still needed her. So, that's what you're here to tell me? Since I am immortal, I really will just keep losing everyone as I grow to love and care about over and over. And, Celestia admonished, that you will never do it alone. Even if I should one day be gone too, Twilight, you will find others. Or if you try to be stubborn about it, others will find you, and enrich your life in ways entirely unique and unimaginable to you. Celestia pulled Twilight closer and nudged her shoulder, encouraging her to look up again. If there is one powerful, wonderful thing that I have learned from all these centuries, is that somehow I never have been loved or been loved by another pony in quite the same way twice. There is richness, depth beyond the measure in these relationships, Twilight. And I promise you from experience, if you allow them to keep getting to know the incredible pony you are, they will teach you so many wonderful things in turn. There is not the time enough in the eternity to get to know them all. Thus we do surround by fullness of life and companionship we live. We live to share the infinite wonder of all those lives, all those experiences, all those moments where nothing seems special, making them somehow the most special of all. That's what makes it worth the pain. And the funniest thing is, they really do have ways to keep finding you when you just don't know you need them. Maybe by, say, spontaneously and quite destructively hatching and argumenting a dragon inside a brand new academic administration tower. Twilight gave a snort of laughter. That's strangely a practical way of looking at it. I thought that might appeal to you, Celestia said, though it is very possible that this too is something I cannot adequately explain or teach, but I think that is what you'll find when the time comes to experience it. I hope you're right. I've been scared that if my life does go span generations, I'll lose the things that made me up until now. I spent so much time in my early life without friendship. The idea of losing it again, it's been on my mind for a long time. It doesn't make me what I have to do now any easier, but still, thank you, Celestia, for being here. I am here anytime you need me, Twilight, and I will always try to help you when I can. And then suddenly Twilight felt a gentle shift in the invisible weave of the world, like a single thread of spider silk brush ever so slightly across her shoulder. She shivered when she felt Celestia tense next to her, and she knew that she had felt it too. Her time is coming, Celestia said. If you go to her, or to go to her, it must be now. I know. Are you ready? Twilight turned back to town. She knew that if she looked hard enough, she could see every window where her friend was working for her. It was dark and uninviting. Most of the city hadn't begun lighting its lamps, although the shadows of its day's last moments lay heavy over it. But she was no stranger to walking into shadow and darkness. It was when she realized a faint, lovely spark of memory had now begun. She had not been alone at it first, longest night so distant now, and the memory was in danger of becoming blurred and dull. She had been able to go to it, because she had gone altogether, and now she could go up to this shadow too. Her friend was already there, and so if they were to do it again, one more time, even if that meant she emerged, she would be able to do so, just a little bit more alone. She took a long, steadying breath. No, but I am going. I understand. Celestia waited for a moment, then asked, Do you want me to come with you? There was again, the grief threatening to overwhelm her. But it felt so right somehow, and if to feel it. Yes, I think she'd like to see you too. Celestia nodded, and supporting Twilight as she rose after her. Then let us go to her and write one more chapter together. They walked past down from the hill at the borders of Ponyville, amongst the households and shops, and towards the long gray building, and then they no longer held each other. They did walk the steadier for the other being at their side, as they were lost from sight. The last of the sunlight vanished from the hilltop along them. Fading into the horizon, only God's gentle aura of the cool evening remained in the sky.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.